Hello and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. Chats on leadership, life and lessons learned, often the hard way. This week, Bridge and I are talking about procrastination. Oh dear, will we ever get started? Maybe later. Can it wait? And whatever other statements we can all hear tripping off the tongue when we don't want to start something. But luckily for you, we are actually ready. So come and join us for being a procrastinator. Hey up, how are you?
Hi, Bobby. Well, talking of procrastination, bearing in mind it's taken us, I think we were supposed to start recording an hour ago. And we've managed to push it back for an hour.
We were doing
important
things.
Like...
Yes, and as my husband is oft to say to me, oh, are you busy talking to Bridge again? Yes, I am busy talking to Bridge. It's very important stuff. Always.
Did you know that 20% of the population consider
20%? I don't believe that. I think it's a damn sight more.
Well, apparently people who self-identify as chronic procrastinators has increased from 5% in 1978 to 26% today. So chronic procrastination. And also, just fun fact, procrastinators are more likely to drink more alcohol than non-procrastinators.
Okay, it is confirmed here that I then am a serial procrastinator. There's no getting away from it. I did wonder if a good way into this was actually to talk about, in the first instance, our own stories with procrastination. And, you know, and where we, I mean, I've just sort of like confessed up to being a serial procrastinator, but just wondering where you feel you are on the scale of this, and then, you know, stuff we do or don't do to stop us from doing it.
Yeah. I hello everyone. I am a procrastinator. I am a serial procrastinator. I'm a chronic procrastinator. Yeah, I really am. And I think I've got worse. I know that I'm sort of delving a little bit into neurospiciness at the moment and where I fall within some of the spectrums. And certainly I strongly suspect that there are some neurospicy elements to procrastination. I know that for people with ADHD, certainly that idea of regulation and self-control, it can be really challenging, and that then causes a lot of procrastination. So yeah, I think I used to use an excuse and sort of go, well, I do my best work under pressure. That's, I think, what a lot of people say, and I am very much a person who will do, you know, I was doing the research for this, set the alarm up early so I could finish doing the research for this, you know, taking down my notes from my search last night for various things, and then this morning I'm sort of taking notes and going, because part of it is I think that if I don't do that, I forget all the work that I do. It just pops out of my head, so there may be an element of that. But when I look at sort of the descriptions of the types of procrastination, so perfectionist, worrier, overdoer, dreamer, defier, I think that probably for me, I have been wondering whether there's an element of fear of failure. And so big things I put off because I'm just like, there's also an element of perfectionism, I think, because once I get into my sort of down my rabbit hole, then I will just keep going at it. I don't want to send it out because there's always another little thing that I might, there's some more, and there is an element of that. And then interestingly, what I hadn't thought about until I was looking at this, the defier, because I don't like doing what I'm told, and I don't like, you're putting me under pressure, I don't like being told that I have to do this now, and I have a little voice that I absolutely hear it sometimes when I'm going, oh yeah, I need to do this, and this little voice goes, I don't want to do it. And like a kid, like a toddler, and I'll be lying there and I kind of chuckle to myself going, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. So Yeah, sorry everyone, sharing that I'm a massive child in my head. But yeah, since I've been working for myself without a schedule, without not a schedule, structure and a schedule, I have found it even more difficult.
I always worry when we're doing these that we're far too much alike.
What did your daughter call us the other day? What did your daughter call us the other day? We're the same person,
A different,
just a different font.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, my darling. Bridge and I, same person, different font. Love it. We actually ought to use that as some kind of marketing material, I think, somewhere along the line. So yes, so we definitely need to do research and not procrastinate on our research, I think, is one of the points we have to make, because otherwise it's same, and we've got, and what's really good is that we step out to go, well, what's it like in being in other people's shoes? And so I think that there'll be some of that coming up. But first of all, my shoes. I was thinking about this. Do you know what? When I was at school and at university, anyone who knows me from that era would be like, I would freak them out because my work was done always ahead of deadlines, constantly. And there was definitely something in that, because I was like, well, I am going to get it all done on this day or then, and I'm not pulling all-nighters because I might miss a party. Or I might miss something really interesting going on. So I really was able to delay the reward bit by getting all my shit together. And yet, the older I've got, the more that has gone out of the window. But so I do know how to do that. There has been a period of my life where I was absolutely on it. And people go, oh, have you started your essay yet? I'd be like, oh, it's in. And that wasn't skimming the surface, not putting much effort in. That was me first in, getting all the books so nobody else could book them out in the library. You know, all of that sort of malarkey, because I had already done all of mine, and then off you go. And I think that was very much about wanting to be in control. I didn't want to have to wait until somebody was putting a book back in for me to be able to do my research or stuff like that. So I just got ahead of the game and always did that. And then I guess that still went through start of military career with soldiers' reports and things like that. I was always on time with all of that. So I think there's something in it, is that I will absolutely make sure it gets done and is well ahead if it's for somebody else. So there's that element. There is definitely an element of that to it. And then there's the stuff where it might be difficult. It might take a long time. I might fail. It might not be good enough. So there's definitely the anxiety, the fear of failure, the perfectionism element in it there as well. I mean, in fact, story from yesterday, I had got to take some pictures that I wanted to include in PowerPoint slides and kept going, oh, I can't take them yet because I haven't washed my hair. Oh, I can't take them yet because it's not sunny enough outside. And I don't know what I had in my head that these photographs were going to be like, but I clearly haven't done a Slay Your Selfies course or, you know, some amazing photography thing, because I look like shit. And of course, I've now left it to the last minute, so they had to be used. But equally, I was like, oh, well, it's too late now. They're just going to have to go in as they actually are. So I can get away from the perfectionism. But it's almost like I should have just taken them, because I know that I'm not a very good photographer. So, sorry, that was a bit of a digression. So it's happening right here in the here and now. But I'm like you. I am struggling to work out how to schedule on my time. And there's also something that goes on in me as well, is that I will think that a piece of work is going to take hours. And so I have got to have that allotted time to do the whole thing. So I couldn't possibly start X, Y, and Z because I need 2 hours and I can't find 2 hours. Or it's going to take half a day. I can't possibly find half a day to do all of that. And so I spend my life going, well, in actual fact, when I sit down and do the damn thing, it might not take that long. Or I tried, and we'll come on to this, but I tried the Pomodoro technique yesterday and it worked like a dream, which I've never done before. And I got so much done. So that's a little bit about what I've done in preparation for our conversations here. But there are some definite things in there for me in terms of the reasons why that I think, I mean, I've found an article that comes up with 9, which we can probably go through all of them and go, yep, that's me, or that's when I do that. But I think we've come up with some of those already as we've been discussing our own stance on this.
I'm interested where you said that you used to be able to, like, you kind of did it like a dream before. Is there anything that's changed in terms of now that you've noticed that it's become more difficult, or just that there's fewer parties that you miss? I don't know.
So there's a couple of things I think that spring to mind. So when I first finished training, so it went like a dream, school, uni. Then we finish our military training, get into those first, for me, the first type of jobs that I had in the military, that most of the time you could do your, what I would call an in-tray in a day, because there really wasn't very much in it, because it was much more about being out on the ground with your troop. It was practical leadership. I then got to my adjutant job, which had a sodding great in-tray, and I had absolutely no way of understanding how to do it, because I was still in that mode of, I have to get through my whole in-tray today. And of course, it was completely impossible. And so I went to talk to a senior officer in the brigade and said, I'm really struggling here. I mean, that was one of the first times ever I'd asked for help. And so I didn't get a Filofax, which was the thing at the time. Oh my God, now we're showing our age, aren't we? It was a time management Filofax of some description where you could carve up your tasks. And I used it religiously throughout the whole of that role and roles after that. And again, kept myself really organised. And then I'm trying to remember the moment when it's really taken more of a hold. And I think it's more recently, because I'd say that I was still pretty organised with corporate structure. And then we got to COVID. And I think that that's where it's disappeared, if I'm honest. Whilst I had deadlines within the hotel industry, they were all set by me. Nobody was really setting a deadline. And, you know, there were days that I would be really driven to get stuff done, but there was so much of the job that I couldn't stand that I put it to one side. I didn't want to do it. And it was also, I think this was the thing, if we actually bring the two things together as I'm sitting here reflecting on it now, it was a job which required a lot of practical leadership. I loved the bit being back out in the hotels with the general managers, with the staff, with my team, working things through. And then there was a pile of HR shit left on my desk to have to deal with when I got back, which I really didn't want to do. And I think that's where it took some root. And now I'm trying to find my way back to all of those skills that I know I had in the past. And yeah, I haven't been employing for the last few years.
I really like that it's a skill. So again, I guess for people like me who really, I mean, I've been disorganized all my life since I was a kid. And I was interested to see this idea that it's a skill. I don't know that I necessarily agree that the whole thing is a skill. But
or a practice, a habit, yeah.
And so that, you know, there are solutions, coping mechanisms, depending where you are on that scale of being able to manage your time. But interestingly enough, some of the sort of triggers that I've seen are boredom, goal misalignment. And so that's a really big one in terms of you usually can find time to do things that you want to do. And weirdly, you know, I will always get up and feed the cat. Well, actually, maybe that's because she smacks me on the face if I don't wake up and feed her. But, you know, just random things that I quite enjoy doing. I'm currently drying rose hips in my oven so I can make rose hip facial, and I've made loads of time for cutting those bloody things up, scooping the insides out. It took me like 2.5 hours, but you know, I found the time to do that. And so I think that understanding, or having a driver, weirdly, laundry, is one of my go-to procrastination things. And so I find there's something very comforting for me about doing laundry. Whenever I feel anxious or stressed out about something, the very first thing I do is go and do laundry. Mohammed will come back and there'll just be clothes hanging up everywhere, and he's been, oh, you've been doing laundry again. Are you okay? Like, yeah, I'm fine now. I've done my laundry. Yeah, so weird things like that. But some of the things that I saw as sort of coping mechanisms that I have used along the way, and this idea of clear goals and priorities and making sure that your goals are smart. And we've talked about SMART goals, season 2, I think, when we were talking about not resolutions. But that's one thing, is to actually understand what it is that you've got to do. Because I think one of the things, particularly for me, that I think often challenges me in terms of getting things done is it just seems enormous. So this idea of eating the elephant by bites. I have. Have you heard that?
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. And so breaking it down into manageable steps. And some of the suggestions, I've done project management training, blah, blah, blah. And Gantt charts actually are quite useful in terms of visualizing if you're a visual person. So you've broken it all down, but you've gone to when do I need to deliver this? And you've broken each chunk down as to when it needs to be done. And that's also really useful. We were talking earlier about how sometimes if we're working in a team and everyone's contributing, and if there's one person who's the procrastinator or doesn't deliver their bit that inputs in, that it then has a roll-on effect to everyone else and impacts everyone else. And suddenly the person who hasn't done their job causes the emergency for the person at the end who suddenly has to do everything. Oh, this has to be done overnight, tomorrow morning, while you're on leave or during the weekend, because somebody didn't do what they were supposed to do earlier in the process. And so Gantt charts are really good for you to visualize that if I put this off, what this is going to do to what I have to achieve. The Pomodoro stuff, I found Pomodoro really, really helpful, and we'll put a link into it. But effectively, Pomodoro is setting timers for a specific amount of time to focus, and then you have an automatic break, and you can set the time for the break, and you kind of do it in chunks, and then you have a longer break. It is a technique that some people with ADHD use, and they find, because the other thing with ADHD is that you can get hyper focused. So you really struggle to be focused, and then you become hyper focused and you lose all track of time, and you'll suddenly look up and like 3 hours have gone and you've missed 2 appointments. You're supposed to be in a meeting. It happens to me all the time. So you know how long it takes you to get into your groove. So you don't want to set it too short so that you're kind of disrupted in your groove, but you don't want to set it too long that you then become hyper focused and lose track of time. So after a while you can play with those, and that's why I quite like the Pomodoro technique. Time batching, which is putting similar tasks together. So again, you can focus on certain things, because I also find I get distracted very easily. And so it's a bit like, how many tabs do you have open? I think that's always a good test. How many tabs you have open on your computer, but also how many tabs you have open in your brain. One of the things I saw was, if you set your task, you finish that task before you move on. So this idea of women multitasking, blah, 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 blah. Actually, it's not always the most efficient way to deal with things. So I get that often you have to if you've got lots of responsibilities. But one of the things I found interesting, check-ins, accountability, and a bit of self-compassion, acknowledging that we all do it a little bit. But one of the things I've found interesting, so a couple of things in terms of how you organise your day and how you schedule your day, because we're all different, right? But so some people advise don't do emails, because emails just sort of sap your everything, really. Don't do emails first thing in the day, but do an important task, have your important tasks so that they're done. But then other people advise actually do a couple of small irritating things first so you can feel smug for the rest of the day. So I was kind of interested in that approach, because Mel Robbins, she's got the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 approach. That was her getting out of bed when she was in massive depression, had all kinds of mental health issues going on. And I quite like that, and there's a video which we'll put in the resources where she talks about this, but the 5 4 3 2 1 counts you down and kind of takes away your other bits of your brain talking about, oh, I can't be asked, don't want to, but you count it down, go 5 4 3 2 1, and then just go and do whatever it is. And then, you know, by the time your brain that doesn't want you to do stuff, or is the teenager or the spoiled toddler or whatever saying, I don't wanna, you've already started it. I often use it to go to the gym.
So there's loads in there. I've just been so something triggered for me when you talked about Gantt charts that I've just remembered as well, because whilst this is not meant to be a coaching session, I'm just sitting here wondering how I have landed in this slightly disruptive or chaotic way that I now work, that I never used to be like. It's suddenly just striking me, because it wasn't until we got onto this call that I thought, I never used to be like this. And so when I had children, everything was on a spreadsheet. So I'm just thinking now about all of those who are, I know this recording will go out later, but who are returning after the school holidays. I had the whole of Ella's summer holiday on a spreadsheet, week by week. Who was looking after her, which camp she might be at, what she'd need for the day, how much it cost. It just went on and on. And I didn't create that. There was a friend of mine who created it, and I took it on and used to use it religiously for every single school holiday. But what happened was that if one little thing went out of sync with it, I'd go ballistic. And like the whole thing was ruined because my plan, couldn't come to bear. But I got into a mode of life where everything had to be planned. Christmas, on a spreadsheet. When you want to talk about how many tabs I had open, I still have the timings for a Christmas dinner on a spreadsheet. It's actually very handy, I have to say. But I then had lists because I was Christmas shopping for me, my mum, another elderly relative. And so I would then have lists of everybody's Christmas presents so that I could coordinate all of that. I also have my Christmas shopping lists of perishables and non-perishables on a spreadsheet as well. That's what my life used to be like. So
that sounds like a dream. Like I'm listening
so I can,
to going, oh my
so
God.
I can definitely do it like for Christmas. This is what I said. But so I am sitting here really trying to think, what is going on? Well, I mean, fair enough. I mean, if I think now about the spreadsheets I've been creating for the podcasts, and there's elements of it creeping back in to life. So things that I enjoy, things that I love, such as the podcast and Christmas, I will organise myself for. But what really happened, and there was a breaking point with this, which is when I started coaching, that I wanted my whole life to be controlled on a spreadsheet. And of course, that was ridiculous because I had young children and then I had teenagers. I was working. There was all sorts of other things. You can't control your life on a spreadsheet. But I had absolutely sapped all of the joy, all of the creative stuff out of life. And of course, now that I'm this independent, I think what's going on for me is that I love the creative. And I'd much prefer to be doing that than anything else. So I think when you're talking about the time batching, I think that's really, really a good idea for me. And as I say, yesterday with the Pomodoro, I got through loads. And so what that was teaching me was how much I can get done in 25 minutes. So in 2 25-minute sittings, I wrote a whole blog piece from start to finish, done. 25 minutes later, I'd reminded myself how to load it onto my website, schedule it, done. And I know that will get quicker the more that I do that. And again, I think I can get into real rabbit holes with the research that we do for these. I need to time bound myself. We've been talking about boundaries this morning. I think with my work, I need to be much more realistic about the timings of how long things take and get over myself that I can have a 4-hour stretch of no distractions. Because what's so bizarre is that I'll be going, right, I want a 4-hour stretch with no distractions. It's me that distracts myself with my phone. I'll check something out online. I'll go and make a coffee and then decide I want something to eat, and then the telly's there. So I'll think, oh, I can get away with just watching a bit of telly. I mean, I can do a whole host of things. So one of the reasons that somebody was talking about present and future gains. So I think that I have gone from being able to delay gratification to needing it immediately. So I'd rather be doing that rather than waiting for, get this done. I also thought about Harry, my grandson, where I go, right, if you eat all of your dinner, then you'll have pudding, then you can have ice cream. You were talking about treating yourself like a child. I think I need to treat myself like a toddler. You can do X once you've finished Y.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there is something very much about balance. There is the structure that's required. What did I read? They were talking about, let me find it. They were talking about the different types of procrastinator, or the tendencies. And I think you've, by different names, named some of these while we've been talking. So the first one is the upholder. So an upholder is able to respond equally to in and out expectations. So they love schedules, they love routines, they like to know what's expected of them. They don't like making mistakes, they don't like letting people down. So there is a period of my life where I've definitely been an upholder. I don't think it's ever come across your desk from what you've been saying, rather than me judging you harshly. So there is an upholder. Then there's the questioner, who only meets their internal expectations. So it's all about info, it's all about logic, it's all about efficiency. They love improving processes and things like that. So they're not really giving a toss about what's happening externally. It's what's going on for them. Then there's the obliger. So they're the person who actually struggles to meet their internal expectations because they are responding readily to everything external. So they'll meet deadlines, they'll keep promises, they'll follow through for others. So again, I think there is a version of me in there. And I think there is for you as well, actually, with what we've been.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I get things done, but it's always at the expense of...
Yeah, so and then there's the rebel, which you've sort of like mentioned in other words as well, where they resist all expectations. They want to be able to choose, make their own actions. They'll often do things to say, fuck it, just to confirm that they can, even if it's against themselves, so that they are reassuring themselves that they've still got the freedom to choose. And I think there is a definite element of that's what's going on for me at the moment. This, woo, I'm an independent.
Oh, yeah.
Sod you, I can do X, Y, and Z, which of course I haven't because I've got commitments and, an accountability to others. So I definitely need like accountability buddies. And you were mentioning, that sort of like element. And I think the other thing that I need, that I've found as well, Pomodoro technique is now going to be my friend. But the other one is changing my environment, because I recently went to a co-working space with somebody I didn't know very well, but I had a brilliant day and got so much done. I've often found if I go to a coffee shop and just sit there, I get loads done, just in that different mode, which I don't do in terms of being in the house. And I think that's my other question for these changes, is that I get more done when I'm not at home. And yet so many of us are now working from home. Our distractions have gone up tenfold in different ways, I think, since this has become a much more normal way of working.
Yeah, I mean, some people thrive working from home. I'm with you. Far fewer opportunities to do laundry if I'm not at home. And I have been thinking, after hearing you talk about the co-working experience, and we were talking about it a couple of days ago, but I am thinking that maybe I should go and work, or try and do some work outside of my little office. I absolutely hear you. I think a couple of things that you'd said before about social media and TV and all of those things are really, really, really distracting. And I'd love to work out how I can do some internet research without them also being able to go onto social media. Another interesting thing that I sort of came across was this idea of that you're much more likely to get on with things if you understand the why. So Sir Simon Sinek, homage to him, but this idea of your why, particularly if you are motivated by obligations to others, and if you're in a team, if you know, I need to do this because these people need this work to be able to then do their work. It's definitely a motivator for me. It's obviously a motivator for you. I often find it's easier to do work that I know other people are waiting for. I would never be late for payroll or anything that relates to people's pay or benefits or references for jobs. All of those things. The moment that comes in, I'm all over that. I don't delay those things. So I think the why of something, and so this idea of looking at what you have to do, making it less scary by breaking it down, understanding the importance of it and why it's important for other people, if that's what motivates you, not for some of the other things, but if that motivates you, then look at that. And then some realistic ideas about how long things are going to take. So, this idea, this is going to take half a day, and say, well, okay, fine, I'm going to chunk it into, I've got an hour and I'll see where I get with it. Do some Pomodoro stuff and you might suddenly find that you whiz through it. One of the other things that I saw that made me think of you actually was that movement, if you're struggling to get, just like, oh, I don't wanna, even if it's getting out of bed or whatever, is this idea of movement. And it's so interesting that somatics, or this movement, or this elements of the body, well, every single topic we talk about, there is an element of that. And so that was, talking about just, even if it's just stretching or having a wiggle or whatever, some people work really well with alarms. I've found, because I really do lose track of time quite a lot, that I have to set alarms for things. So not just in the morning to get me out of bed, but to say, okay, I set alarm 10 minutes before I need to be leaving to go to the doctor, or if 10 minutes before I'm supposed to be having a meeting with someone, to get me out of whatever reverie I'm in, to get my shit sorted, or, change my clothes or whatever, or brush my hair if I'm going to be on video. Accountability partner, I think, is really, really important. And that really often helps me. And also taking breaks, recognizing that breaks are important, rather than just going, I've got to do this for the next 2 hours. Because there is a creative, I think there's a tension. Some people do say, I do my best work when I'm under pressure. And, there is some evidence that taking breaks helps with creativity. So some form of, not chronic, but some elements of procrastination, going for a walk, thinking about doing laundry, allows the bit of your creative brain to chunk through some stuff that it needs to chunk through before you can get onto it. So if you are creative, the idea of breaks is important, and procrastination is not always a big problem, but it's just when it gets to this chronic phase of just everything's too much, you can't focus, oh my god, just you're running around in circles and you've got too many tabs open. That is problematic for leaders, because your team doesn't know what the fuck's going on, no one can rely on you, people don't take you seriously, you don't come across as professional. So even if you're getting stuff done on time, you're handing it in on the very last second as you're running through the door, panting and looking harried. Everyone knows it's because you haven't got your shit sorted. And so you give the impression, whether rightly or not, that you're not in control of stuff, you haven't got a handle on things. And so I think there's lots of reasons why you need to get a grip of procrastination if you haven't got a grip of it. But a little bit of it is, as with everything, a little bit of it is...
I agree. I was wondering from the leadership perspective about the emotions that we go through, because I'm with you. Considering I purport to be a somatic coach, I am terrible when I get absorbed with doing something. I can sit and not move, almost to the point of thinking that I should be back to buying that commode again for my study, because I can't be bothered to leave it, because I can't even be bothered to go to the loo. Probably too much information, sorry listeners, but the vision,
the visions
just like,
right now. It's like you sat there in a Victorian commode.
I've got to finish this spreadsheet, or there's this look of relaxation suddenly over my face as we're recording. You wonder why I turned the video camera off. Just saying. Anyway. Oh my God, that's awful. Anyway, so, but that whole technique yesterday about 25 minutes and then 5 minutes moving around, perfect. But I was very interested in the sort of emotions to it and what you try to do. I watched this video. I'll have to try and remember where I found it, but it was you know how much I hate maths, but it was a formula. And it basically said that motivation equals expectancy times value divided by impulsiveness times delay. So the motivation, of course, is the willingness that you want to do the work. The expectancy, and I think this is where emotion plays in, is because your expectancy to succeed. So if you're actually in that mode of, oh God, this is too difficult, I'll never get started. Here's my example. So there's that self-talk element that we've talked about before, whereas trying to come up with the mantra of I'll learn as I go. And if I think what I've been up to with AI and Canva and everything else I've been learning in this last year, I have had to have the mantra of I'll learn as I go. And that bite-sized chunk bit that you've been talking about as well. So that is what will help you with the expectancy bit, expectancy to succeed. Now you times that by value. So here we go. How much do you enjoy the task? That's when it goes down if it's boring. And what does the reward look like? So that's that level of necessity for instant gratification versus being able to stave it off. Now, the fact is that there might be bugger all reward in a boring task. But what you then do in that mode is if I get this done, I can give myself a treat, whatever that might be. I'm not going to start stipulating treats for everybody, so that will up the value of it. So that keeps that expectancy times value high. Then you're dividing it by impulsiveness times delay. So the impulsiveness is the tendency to get distracted. I am off the flipping scale. So when we're talking about the things that we need to put in place to stop ourselves from being distracted, and some of the stuff we've been talking about is move to a different environment, put your phone on airplane mode. I might just give my phone to Ash so that I can't get anywhere near it. But of course, then I'm still on the computer. But, whatever your distractions are, what can you do? What can you practice to actually limit those, which will bring that number down? And then times delay, the time lapse until the reward. So that's that later bit. So I really like that. I mean, I don't know that if I'd ever play numbers with it, but it would just be interesting to just do that every now and again with a particular task, which will actually help you identify which bit of that is at play that's sending the scores awry. And I think for me, the thing that will cause it to be out of kilter, and this is the procrastination bit, of course, is the tendency to get distracted. Then you play that to the emotions in it. I loved that bit about the self-talk and I'll learn as I go, and the bite-sized chunks so that it feels more manageable, and being able to deal with the discomfort. We're back to that again. Being able to be tolerant in that bit, but being in discomfort for 25 minutes in a Pomodoro technique rather than sitting there all day and achieving nothing. You can give yourself that break and go, it's just not happening today. I'll need to do something else. Or I've actually managed to do 25 minutes and I haven't died. Do you know?
Yes. Yeah. Hey, wow. And
I got something done.
I think that's really important, because the emotion element, if I think about myself, there's also an element of guilt and, I don't know, a little bit of self-loathing, which is like, oh God, I always do this. Why can't I get this done? And I think that one of the things that I've found with the Pomodoro technique was, after 25 minutes, I could be proud of myself. I was like, oh, I did something. And I didn't just sit and twiddle my thumbs or scroll through more LinkedIn articles to distract myself, or whatever it is, convincing myself, I'm doing research for the podcast, or I'm doing research for marketing or whatever. But you do, I felt the same way, that after I'd managed to get something done for 25 minutes and I'd earned my 5-minute break, I was like, okay, this does work and I am not as useless as my self-talk is telling me. And so a lot less guilt. And I think there's the issue of forgiveness. So one of the things I thought was interesting that I noticed was in some of the research was saying that actually this self-forgiveness diminishes procrastination. So the more you are able to go, hey, what was it? Self-forgiveness and it wasn't gratitude. There's another word, can't remember what it is, but it was a light gratitude. It was effectively acknowledging what you had done. Even if it wasn't, you're going, oh, well, I was supposed to do 7 hours today. And you're like, well, I did 3 hours. But actually, then you go, but the work I got done in those 3 hours is probably more than I would have done just sort of kicking my heels for 7 hours. So that idea of forgiveness, generosity to self, and acknowledging what you have achieved, all of those things really, really make a difference to procrastination tendencies. And so, we've talked about journaling before, we've talked about those sort of reflection pieces before and how important they are. But, there's research that demonstrates that for people who are chronic procrastinators, the more you do that, the less you procrastinate, which I found fascinating. I'd never thought of it like that. And so now it's sort of a thing I'm going to have to.
And there's different ways of doing that. So I know that what I have been, I was going to say trialing. I'm not in a trial, practicing. And I think I will do more of. I have a very long list. If I look at the long list, it's a complete overwhelm. So what I've done over the last few days, it's interesting. I wish we'd done this bloody topic much earlier because I might have actually saved myself awful lot of angst. But I have gone to that list and gone, okay, what are the things that need to get done by a particular date? What are my nice to haves, whatever it might be? So, the matrix of important, not important, urgent, not urgent. It's a box matrix anyway. Sure. So I have then written myself a post-it, which is a much more achievable list of what I want to get done today. And I've been assessing whether I do that or not to go, you planned well, that was really achievable within that. You overstretched yourself, whatever it might be. And I'm finding as time goes on, I am getting through that little post-it list. And one of the other things I was going to say is that when I was looking at this list about the reasons that we are procrastinators is that sometimes it's about the role models that we've had. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And it was basically saying, if your role models have been procrastinators or whatever it might be, get yourself new role models. So I thought it was like, that's a very good. Thanks very much for that. That's really very useful. When I think back to my parents, God bless them, I remember my mum being an absolute perfectionist. She used to do calligraphy writing on every child's certificate at the end of term. She was a head teacher and she would write the most beautiful writing on their certificates. I hope those adults and very old people now have still got those, because my mum would be up all night doing those because she would always leave it because it was such a thankless task, but she would always do it because it was for somebody else. So I've watched the role model all-nighter, doing things for other people. My dad, bless him, would be, today I'm going to do this, and this. And my mum, hypocrite that she was, would always go, would it not be better to just do this and that? And of course, he would then be frustrated at the end of the day because he hadn't got this, and this done because it was too much. So I've been very mindful of them as well. So whilst they have always been my role models, I think that, when I look at other people, there are people doing this much better. And all of those things that we've talked about in this session that we've just done are different ideas for doing things differently. And I am definitely in the midst of that as new practices right now.
So we need to think of people, and maybe this is also invite anyone who's listening, that if you are a procrastinator, to maybe identify someone who isn't or is less of a procrastinator, to start to look at what they do and maybe follow some of the modeling things that they do. I mean, actually talking to people and finding out what other things work for them is a really great way, I think, certainly Pomodoro has worked for you. I find it useful when I use it, and so I think my rebel brain, the moment I just realised that it actually was quite useful, I thought, I'm not doing that anymore. I have real struggles with my voice, my rebel voice, and me.
I think we have to name this Rebel You. It needs to be some ridiculous name.
Yes.
Anyone who wants to come up with some suggestions, please let us know.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll put it as the quiz for this episode to see if anyone can find the name for Rebel Bridget's
brilliant
brain. Yeah. Oh, yes, that would be great. I would just be able to say, okay, so and so's come out now. Yeah, and we're at the end of the recording now. I think we've delved into quite a lot of useful techniques and understanding, I guess. I think that sometimes even just understanding what's going on can help being able to deal with it. And I shall have to start going to the library, I think, to do some...
The library will be too quiet for you. You'll try and do something rebellious there. Choose your environment wisely. So on that note, I have a quote. I love this. Procrastination is like a credit card. It's a lot of fun until you get the bill. So, Christopher Park, I have not been able to investigate who you are, but thank you very much for that. But I think I'm going to put that up somewhere because I love that. Procrastination is like a credit card. It's a lot of fun until you get the bill. Love it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby.
Bye.
Right, see you next week.
Thanks for listening. All the resources mentioned are on our website and Spotify page, where you can read, listen, watch, and dig a little deeper at your leisure. Next week, Bridge and I are joined by two guests from Fighting with Pride, the LGBT plus military charity. Colonel Ali Brown, OBE, amongst many other things, a trustee for Fighting with Pride, and Alex Merrick, community worker with the charity, will be joining us. This episode lands just ahead of National Coming Out Day on 11th of October, and it will have recently been the 25-year anniversary since the European Court of Human Rights ruling, which ultimately led to the gay ban in the military being lifted in January 2000. There will be much to discuss. So join us then for being allowed to be proud.